welcome to DIY with Nancy. Well, today I'm going to share with you my almond tart recipe made with a puff pastry tart shell. The filling is almost like an almond paste texture. It's so delicious, mouth-watering really. And then topped with some sliced almonds and some powdered sugar. But what I really love about this recipe, it's actually very quick to make. I would say by putting it together, baking time within an hour, you have this tart done. So stay with me and I'm going to show you how to make my almond tart step by step. Let's get started with the first step. In a medium-sized saucepan, which I have here on the stove, I'm going to place 1 cup of water. I'm going to place the cup of water in the saucepan, and once I have the water in there, to that I'm going to add 1 lemon peel. Place that in the water as well, and next I'm going to add 1 1/4 cups of granulated sugar. Now at this point, I'm going to turn the stove on to a medium heat. I'm just going to give it a quick stir. This is going to come to a boil. Now once it comes to a boil, you'll see that the sugar will dissolve into the water and it will form a syrup. And at that point, I'll show you the next step. Now you can see that the sugar and water has come to a boil. At this point, I'm going to turn off the heat and let it set for about 5 minutes, and then I'll show you the next step. I've waited about 5 minutes, and now at this point, what I'm going to do is remove the lemon peel. So the syrup already has the flavor of the lemon peel. That's exactly what I wanted. I'm going to remove the lemon peel, and now at this point, I'm going to add 2 cups of almond flour. And the almond flour that I'm using is already ground up. It's a blanched almond flour, and each cup is 250 milliliters. Now I've added the almond flour to the saucepan with the sugar syrup. The sugar syrup is still warm, so what I'm going to do is stir to combine the almond flour into the syrup. And it's going to be a very loose, wet mixture, just as you see it here. You just want to make sure you mix in the almond flour into that sugar syrup very well. Make sure it's well combined. There's no lumps of almond flour at the bottom of the saucepan. Now I'm going to mix the almond flour into the syrup for about a minute or so, and then I'll show you the next step. All right, I've been mixing for about a minute. I'm going to set it aside, let it cool. It's going to thicken, and we're going to move on to the next step. Now for the next step, I have a puff pastry sheet that I've just removed out of the refrigerator. It's nice and cool. I'm going to place it in my round 11-inch tart pan. Now my puff pastry sheet is a square puff pastry sheet, and as you can see, my tart pan is round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the puff pastry sheet, and then what I'm going to use is a piece of parchment paper to place on top, and then roll it out and stretch out the puff pastry sheet so it can fit perfectly into my tart pan. Now using a rolling pin, I'm just going to stretch out my square puff pastry sheet, make it big enough where it can fit into my tart pan. Now I'm going to take the tart pan eventually and just place it right over the puff pastry just to see if it's big enough where it can fit the edges, and it's perfect. So I'm going to place it right on top with the paper, and very gently you want to tuck in the puff pastry to the bottom and the edges of the tart pan, just as I'm doing here. Now for the next step, I have some extra puff pastry around my tart pan that I don't need. And I'm just using my rolling pin to roll it over the tart pan, and that way I can remove the extra puff pastry just as I'm doing here. Now I have some parchment paper hanging over my tart pan. I'm going to just cut that with a scissor, and next I'm going to use a fork to poke holes on the bottom of the tart shell. That way the steam can be released while it's being baked in the oven. Now that my puff pastry tart shell is ready, I'm going to place it in the refrigerator, keep it nice and cool, and move on to the next step. Now for the next step, we're going to finish off the almond filling. Now look how it's thickened while I was preparing the tart. It's not completely cool, but it has thickened, almost like an almond paste. I'm going to take the almond mixture, place it in a bowl, and I'm going to finish off the almond filling for the almond tart. So I'm going to place all of the almond mixture right into the bowl. Next, I'm going to add 2 whole eggs and 4 egg yolks. I'm going to add the 4 egg yolks first, and then I'm going to add the 2 whole eggs. I just want to separate it so you can see that's 6 eggs, and then we're going to add half a cup of unsalted butter at room temperature, or 1 stick of butter. That's half a cup. And for the next ingredient, I'm adding a 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract for that additional almond flavor. Now to combine the ingredients, I'm going to use the whisk, but if you prefer, you can use your stand mixer or your handheld mixer. Now I'm going to whisk the ingredients until they're well combined, nice and creamy, so it'll take me about a minute to get it to that texture. Now my creamy almond mixture has come together nicely, and now for the final ingredient, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. Okay, that's all the ingredients for the almond filling. I'm just going to combine the flour into the mixture, and once it's all combined, I'm going to remove the tart shell from the refrigerator and bring this almond tart together. My puff pastry tart shell is nice and cool. I'm going to place the almond filling right into the tart shell, just as I'm doing here. Now I have the tart filling in the tart shell. I'm just smoothing it over. I'm going to give it a gentle tap just to even it out. Look at that. Perfect. And just before I place the tart in the oven, I'm going to place half a cup of sliced almonds right on top. I'm just going to drizzle it over evenly before I place it in the oven. Now you want to make sure at this point you have your oven preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. My almond tart is ready to go into the oven. I'm going to bake it at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for approximately 30 to 35 minutes, placing it on the top rack. My almond tart is out of the oven. I had it in the oven for exactly 30 minutes. Now, if you want your almonds to be a little more brown on the top, leave it for an additional 2 to 5 minutes. I'm going to let it cool and set, and I'll show you the next step. I've let my almond tart cool. I'm going to add the final ingredient, which is confectioner's sugar. I'm going to dust some confectioner's sugar on top, and it's going to give it that extra sweetness. This tart in itself, the filling is not very sweet, but this just complements it so well. Now all there's left to do is to remove the tart from the tart pan, place it on a serving platter, cut into it, and show you what it looks like inside. Okay, I've just cut my slice, but let me show you the texture of this almond tart. Beautiful. It has a beautiful color. It's very moist on the inside. It's really mouth-watering. It's out of this world. It's so delicious and it smells so good. Enough with the talking. I'm gonna bite into this. The texture is just perfect. The combination of the puff pastry and the moist almond filling. It's delicious and easy to make, and I hope you give this recipe a try. And there you have it, everyone. That's my almond tart recipe. I love the combination of the puff pastry and the almond in the inside because it almost tastes like an almond paste. So when you bite into it, you got the flakiness of the puff pastry with that very moist texture of the almond filling, and then dusted with some powdered sugar on top. Mouth-watering. It's absolutely delicious dessert. You can bring this to any dinner party. It's fairly quick to make, and I hope you all enjoyed this recipe of my almond tart. And if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, thanks so much for watching. Take care, everyone. I'm gonna finish eating the rest of my tart.